Have you ever stopped to wonder why certain people seem to get under your skin? There's that one co-worker who won't stop interrupting, or that friend who's always late. And yet, the strangest part isn't them, it's your reaction to them. Why does that specific behavior irritate you so much? What if I told you that the annoyance you feel has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might just discover that the things you hate most in others are actually a mirror reflecting the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. This could change the way you see everyone, and I mean everyone in your life. So here's the deal. We're diving into the mind of Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant psychologists of all time, to uncover why other people irritate you. Jung believed that your irritation is not random. It's not just about someone being rude, loud, or arrogant. It's much deeper. That irritation is a key to unlocking hidden parts of your own unconscious mind. And when you understand it, you can transform your relationships, your self-awareness, and ultimately, your entire life. Sounds big, right? Well, it is. But first, let me ask you this. Who's the last person that really annoyed you? Hold that thought, because we're about to flip the script. Click subscribe to this channel to get more insights into human psychology. Let's start with something Jung called projection. Imagine this. You're in a meeting, and someone keeps bragging about their achievements. You feel this wave of irritation rising in you like a tidal wave. You think, they're so full of themselves, but wait, what if that irritation isn't about them at all? What if it's about you? Jung's theory of projection suggests that the traits we dislike most in others are often traits we possess but refuse to acknowledge. Think about that. The arrogance you see in someone else could be a reflection of your own insecurity or even your own repressed desire to feel important. It's like holding up a mirror and seeing a part of yourself you'd rather not face. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Jung believed that the unconscious mind is full of these hidden parts of ourselves. He called them the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've pushed into the dark, your fears, your insecurities, your guilt, even your unrealized potential. When someone irritates you, Jung would say it's like your shadow is being poked. That irritation is your unconscious saying, hey, look at this part of you that you're ignoring. Let me give you a real-life example. There was this experiment where participants were asked to write down the traits they disliked most in someone they knew. Then, they were asked to reflect on whether these traits existed in themselves. The results were shocking. Most people, if they were honest, admitted that they shared at least some of those same traits. Maybe not in the exact same way, but enough to feel uncomfortable. This is projection in action. And it's not just about negative traits. Sometimes we project positive traits too. You might admire someone's confidence because deep down, you wish you could be more confident yourself. But here's the kicker. Recognizing projection isn't about blaming yourself. It's about using it as a tool for self-discovery. When you feel irritated, instead of immediately blaming the other person, try asking yourself, what is this irritation telling me about me? It's not easy. It takes courage to look at your shadow. But once you do, you'll start to see your relationships and yourself in a whole new light. Let's take it a step further. Jung didn't just stop at projection. He also talked about archetypes, universal symbols, and patterns that exist in all of us. One of the most important archetypes is, you guessed it, the shadow. But there are others too, like the hero, the caregiver, the trickster. These archetypes shape how we see the world and how we see ourselves. When someone irritates you, it might be because they're embodying an archetype you're struggling with. For example, if someone seems overly controlling, it might trigger your own inner rebel, the part of you that resists authority. Or if someone seems lazy, it might trigger the part of you that feels guilty for not working hard enough. Think about it. Every irritation is like a puzzle piece, a clue to understanding yourself. And the more you pay attention to these clues, the more self-aware you become. But self-awareness isn't just about understanding your shadow. It's also about integrating it. Jung believed that true personal growth comes from embracing your shadow, not running from it. That means acknowledging your flaws, your insecurities, and yes, even the parts of yourself you don't like. Because once you do, those things lose their power over you. Here's a practical exercise you can try. The next time someone irritates you, instead of reacting, pause, take a deep breath. Then ask yourself, what exactly is bothering me? What does this say about me? Write it down if you need to. Over time, you'll start to notice patterns. Maybe you get irritated when people are late because you have a deep fear of being disrespected. Or maybe you get annoyed when someone is loud because you've been taught to suppress your own voice. Whatever it is, the goal isn't to judge yourself. The goal is to understand yourself. And this isn't just about psychology, it's about relationships too. When you understand why someone irritates you, you can respond with empathy instead of anger. You can see them not as a problem, but as a mirror. And that changes everything. Imagine how much easier life would be if you could turn every irritation into an opportunity for growth. That's the power of Jung's theories. But let's not sugarcoat it. This process is hard. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like peeling back layers of yourself you didn't even know existed. But trust me, it's worth it, because on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Freedom from the constant cycle of irritation, blame, and frustration. Freedom to see yourself and others more clearly. And freedom to live a more authentic, fulfilling life. Now, before we go deeper, let me ask you this. Are you ready to confront your shadow? Are you willing to turn the spotlight inward and explore what your irritations are really telling you? If so, let's continue this journey together. Great. Let's dive even deeper into this fascinating journey. Now that we've introduced the idea of projection and the shadow, let's take the next step and explore how these concepts play out in our daily lives, influencing everything from our relationships to our emotional well-being. And here's the thing, we're not just talking about abstract psychology here. This is about real, tangible ways to understand yourself better and improve your interactions with others. Think about this. Every time you feel irritated, it's like a signal is being sent from your unconscious mind to your conscious awareness. That irritation is trying to tell you something. But most of us don't listen, do we? Instead, we react. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we immediately get angry. A coworker talks over us in a meeting, and we snap back or stew in silence. We rarely pause to ask, wait, why am I feeling this way? What's really going on here? Here's where Jung's idea of the personal unconscious comes into play. The personal unconscious is like a storage unit for all the experiences, memories, and feelings you've repressed over the years. Some of these are small, like the time you were embarrassed in 3rd grade, but others are tied to deeper, more painful experiences. And here's the kicker. These repressed elements don't just sit quietly in the background. They influence your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, often in ways you're not even aware of. When someone irritates you, it's often because they're triggering something hidden in your personal unconscious. Let me give you an example. Imagine you had a parent who was overly critical of you growing up. They constantly pointed out your mistakes, and no matter how hard you tried, it never felt like you were good enough. Fast forward to today, and maybe you have a boss who seems just as critical. Every time they give you feedback, you feel this surge of irritation. On the surface, it might seem like your boss is the problem. But if you dig deeper, you might realize that your irritation is connected to those old wounds from your childhood. Your boss is just triggering something that's been there all along. Psychologists have actually studied this phenomenon. There's a concept called transference, which is when we unconsciously transfer feelings and expectations from one relationship onto another. In this case, your irritation with your boss might not be about them at all. It might be about your unresolved feelings toward your parents. And here's where it gets really interesting. Once you become aware of this, you can start to break the cycle. You can separate the past from the present. You can respond to your boss in a way that's grounded in the here and now, instead of being controlled by old patterns. But let's take this a step further. Jung didn't just talk about the personal unconscious, he also introduced the concept of the collective unconscious. This is the idea that we all share a deep, universal layer of the psyche that's filled with archetypes and symbols. These archetypes, like the shadow, the hero, the caregiver, shape how we see the world and how we interact with others. When someone irritates you, it's often because they're activating an archetype within you. For example, let's say you have a friend who's always taking risks, quitting their job to travel, starting businesses that might fail, just generally living on the edge. You find this incredibly irritating. You think, why can't they just be responsible like everyone else? But what if your irritation isn't about them? What if it's about the part of you that longs to take risks but feels too scared to do so? In Jungian terms, your friend might be activating the archetype of the trickster, the part of you that craves freedom and spontaneity, but has been buried under layers of fear and practicality. This is where things get really powerful. When you start to see these patterns, you can use them as a tool for growth. Instead of just feeling irritated, you can ask yourself, what archetype is being triggered here? What does this situation reveal about me? And the best part, this process doesn't just help you understand yourself, it also helps you understand others. You start to see that everyone is just acting out their own archetypes, their own unconscious patterns. And when you see that, it's much easier to respond with compassion instead of judgment. But let's not stop there. Let's talk about the practical side of this. How do you actually use these ideas in your daily life? Well, one of the most effective tools is mindfulness. When you feel irritated, the first step is to pause. Don't react immediately. Take a deep breath and bring your attention to the present moment. This creates a space between the stimulus, whatever's irritating you, and your response. In that space, you have the opportunity to choose how you want to react. Next, ask yourself a series of questions. What exactly is irritating me about this person or situation? Is this irritation really about them, or is it about something in me? What does this irritation reveal about my own fears, insecurities, or unmet needs? It's important to approach these questions with curiosity, not judgment. The goal isn't to beat yourself up or feel guilty, it's to gain insight. And here's the thing, the more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Over time, you'll start to notice patterns. You'll see that certain types of people or situations tend to trigger you in similar ways. And once you see those patterns, you can start to work on the underlying issues. Another powerful tool is journaling. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to reflect on any moments of irritation you experienced. Write down what happened, how you felt, and what you think it might reveal about you. This practice can be incredibly illuminating. It helps you connect the dots between your current experiences and your deeper unconscious patterns. And it's also a great way to track your progress over time. But let's not forget about empathy. One of the most transformative aspects of Jung's work is that it encourages us to see others not as enemies or irritants, but as mirrors and teachers. When someone irritates you, try to put yourself in their shoes. What might they be feeling? What might be driving their behavior? This doesn't mean excusing bad behavior, but it does mean approaching it with compassion. And here's the amazing thing. When you respond to someone with empathy instead of anger, it often diffuses the situation. It creates a sense of connection instead of conflict. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a moment where someone who used to irritate you suddenly didn't anymore? Maybe you saw them in a new light, or maybe you realized that their behavior wasn't about you at all. Those moments are incredibly freeing, aren't they? That's the kind of freedom Jung's ideas can give you. The freedom to see yourself and others more clearly. The freedom to respond instead of react. And the freedom to turn every irritation into an opportunity for growth. Now that we've delved into projection, the shadow, and the ways our unconscious mind shapes our reactions, let's take this even deeper. Because here's the thing. Understanding why people irritate you isn't just about gaining intellectual insight or feeling a little less annoyed in the moment. It's about transforming your entire perspective on yourself and the people around you. And the more you understand, the more you realize that every irritation, every annoyance, every emotional response you have is a doorway into the deepest parts of your psyche. Are you ready to open that door a little wider? Let's start with a psychological experiment that demonstrates just how much our unconscious minds influence us. Researchers once conducted a study where participants were asked to rate strangers based on brief interactions. The catch: the strangers weren't just behaving randomly. They had been instructed to subtly express traits that the participants themselves were known to dislike or repress in their own personalities. The results: almost every participant rated those strangers far more negatively than others who didn't exhibit those traits. What's fascinating is that when participants were later asked to reflect on their own personalities, they often admitted to struggling with the very same traits they had criticized in the strangers. This is projection in action. And it doesn't stop there. Let's talk about the idea of shadow work, a concept that Jung believed was essential for personal growth. Shadow work is the process of identifying, confronting, and integrating the parts of yourself that you've denied or repressed. It's not easy. It requires deep honesty and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But the payoff is huge. When you integrate your shadow, you become more whole, more self-aware, and less controlled by unconscious forces. Here's a practical way to start doing shadow work. Think back to the last time someone really irritated you. Maybe it was a friend who always dominates the conversation, or a coworker who never follows through on their promises. Now, instead of focusing on their behavior, ask yourself, what part of me feels threatened or exposed by this behavior? For example, if you're irritated by someone's arrogance, could it be that you're grappling with your own feelings of inadequacy? Or if you're annoyed by someone's laziness, could it reveal your own fear of being judged as unproductive? But here's where it gets really transformative. Once you've identified what your irritation is revealing about you, the next step is to accept it. This might sound counterintuitive, but acceptance is the key to integration. Jung believed that what you resist persists. In other words, the more you try to deny or suppress a part of yourself, the more power it has over you. By accepting your shadow, by saying, "Yes, this is a part of me," you take away its power. It's like shining a light in a dark room. Suddenly, what felt scary or overwhelming becomes manageable. For example, let's say you have a friend who's constantly seeking attention. Instead of labeling them as needy or annoying, try to see their behavior through a compassionate lens. Maybe they're acting this way because they grew up feeling ignored or undervalued. Or maybe they're struggling with feelings of loneliness or self-doubt. When you approach the situation with empathy, it not only helps you feel less irritated, it also creates the space for deeper connection and understanding. But empathy isn't just about understanding others, it's also about understanding yourself. One of the exercises Jung often encouraged was journaling as a way to explore your unconscious mind. Here's how you can do it. The next time someone irritates you, sit down with a pen and paper and write out everything you're feeling. Don't censor yourself, this is just for you. Then, ask yourself, what does this irritation reveal about my own fears, insecurities, or unmet needs? Write down whatever comes to mind, even if it feels uncomfortable or surprising. Over time, this practice can help you uncover patterns and gain deeper insights into your own psyche. Now, let's talk about the collective unconscious again, because this is where things get really fascinating. Jung believed that the collective unconscious is filled with archetypes, universal patterns and symbols that influence our behavior and perceptions. When someone irritates you, it might not just be about your personal shadow, it might also be about the archetypes they're embodying. For example, someone who seems overly controlling might remind you of the authoritarian father archetype, while someone who seems overly passive might trigger your inner warrior archetype. Understanding these archetypes can help you see the bigger picture of what's really going on. But here's a question for you. What happens when you start to embrace the parts of yourself that irritate you in others? What happens when you stop running from your shadow and start integrating it into your conscious awareness? The answer is simple but profound. You become more whole. You stop being controlled by unconscious patterns and start living in a way that's more authentic and free. And here's the thing. This process isn't just about self-improvement, it's about liberation. When you integrate your shadow, you free yourself from the cycle of blame and irritation. You stop seeing others as problems to be fixed and start seeing them as mirrors that help you grow. And that's a powerful shift. Because the truth is, the people who irritate you the most are often your greatest teachers. They show you the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. And when you face those parts, you unlock a level of self-awareness that can change everything. So let me ask you this. Are you ready to take this journey even further? Are you ready to stop seeing irritation as a problem and start seeing it as an opportunity for growth? Because there's still so much more to explore. Do you want to continue?